Hello, guys. Today we are going to be speaking to Tony, who is Millie's dad. That's how I know him. Millie and Grisha go to the same school together, and Tony is from Hitchin. He's been living in Hitchin area, around like Letchworth and Stevenage all his life. And who are you, Tony? Tell us more about yourself.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Tony Williams. Hi. I have been living, I grew up in a little village called Stanford, just outside Biggleswade. Tiny little village. We were the only black family in the village.
Wow.
And I've been living in the area all my life. Went to school in Letchworth, Catholic school, St Thomas More, and then secondary school in Stevenage, John Henry Newman. And then when I was like late teens, early 20s, I moved into Hitchin itself. Always been around the area, but moved into Hitchin itself and was running clubs and pubs and DJing. And then I got into sales and I've been living an adult life since, a responsible life since then, supposedly. That's me.
Wow, impressive. And so what's your experience of growing up in Hitchin and in a village where you are the only black family?
Well, it was interesting because there's a certain moment, I suppose, in most people of colour as they're growing up, who grew up in England or predominantly white society, where they realise they're not the same as everyone else. Because when you're little, you just see your friends, you just see the people you're playing with, you see your mum and dad, your aunties and uncles and whatever. But there comes a point, and it's usually a trigger, or something happens, or someone says something, and you realise that you're not quite the same. And it's quite an interesting realisation, because you're very young to understand the complexities of race and humanity. But for me, it was when Michael Jackson first straightened his hair, and I went to my dad and went, "Dad, can I have straight hair like Michael Jackson?" And he had to then try and explain why our hair was curly and why some people had straight hair and that sort of thing. So that was my first realisation, I suppose. And it's quite interesting because my daughter is going through a similar stage at the moment. So with her love of Disney princesses, and she keeps talking about wanting long straight hair and long blonde hair. We're trying to have to, explain and make her realise that her hair is beautiful as it is. She doesn't have to change it. It's just not because someone's hair is different, and it doesn't mean it's better. It just means it's different.
Yeah, I'm sometimes want curly hair, but
this is it. And as we get older, we can choose how we want to wear our hair, but it shouldn't be to please society. It should be to please ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good view.
Yeah, not to fit in, but because we want to. That's how we want to do it.
Does she have any? Does she have any questions about, or maybe? Sorry. So does she not want to be brown or black at the moment?
No, it's not the case of that at the moment, because I don't think she's necessarily got to that stage of the realisation. All she knows is her hair's curly, and it's not the same as the Disney princesses. Plus the fact as well, so a bit of a heritage from my side. I'm half Indian, so my mum's from India.
Yes.
My dad's from Grenada in the Caribbean, so I'm of mixed heritage already. And then Caroline, her mum, she's there's a mix of everything. There's some Irish, there's some Danish, there's English, there's.
Oh wow! I never realised.
Yeah, actually, some way back in her family line is also some Cherokee Indian as well. So Native American. So she's a big mix. So trying to make Millie understand that she's individual and unique, and that's a beautiful thing, rather than wanting to be like everyone else necessarily all the time, because it's part of growing up is wanting to fit in, and I think that's where it comes from at the moment, wanting to fit in and be like her friends and what she sees in society. But as we get older, we understand more and then want to stamp our own individuality on it. And the fact that she's got a white sister, and white brothers, and Phoebe's got long brunette hair, and she wants to be like her big sisters. All younger siblings want to be like their biggest brothers and sisters. So there's an element of that too. But as she gets older, we'll handle and deal with that, and just got to keep reinforcing that she's beautiful as she is. So
yeah, she is. Well, she is beautiful. Can't really tell that. So yeah, in terms of the situation that's happening now in the world, especially in America, like yeah, the news is showing terrible pictures. What do you feel is happening in the UK? Is it different? Is it somehow similar?
Yeah, so obviously the situation's been happening for a long time, and for whatever reason, maybe it's the fact that it's happened during a lockdown, and everyone's got a little bit more time on their hands to look and see and look beyond social media. The George Floyd situation has been a catalyst for a much bigger discussion, and obviously what happened to George Floyd was disgusting. There's no other word for what happened, and we've got to understand that no matter what he did or who he is, there's talks of him being a career criminal and horrible things that he's done in his life. That's irrelevant. He was being arrested. Fine, we don't, for whatever reason, that's the police's job. Do your job. But to have a man who's handcuffed on the floor with 3 of you kneeling on him, 1 of you kneeling on his neck, stopping him from breathing, that's not what police are there for. Serve and protect. That's what they're there to do. And there's no argument I can see for the force, the excessive force that was used to restrain him. Well, like I say, this situation has happened many, many times.
You're still frozen.
Am I?
No, there you are. There you are.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so I think I lost you when you were talking about. So yeah, they were doing the job, and I mean, they weren't. The job is not to do the justice. The job is to do.
Yeah. So they're there to enforce the law by getting that person into custody, so they can be put in the trial by the judged by a jury of their peers. They're not judge, jury, and executioner, and that's what's happened in this case. In relation to the UK, we don't have as many incidents like that, fortunately, but it still does happen. There's been a few.
Is police in a way the same? Like, do they act in the same way in the UK?
Yes and no. So it seems to be a lot more overt in the States, but here every young black guy has heard the phrase "you fit the description." That's what we hear when we get pulled up for a stop and search, which has happened to me on numerous occasions. When we were younger, if I was driving around in my dad's car, which was a fairly nice car, I could guarantee I was going to get pulled over every time. There's incidents where people, walking around, black guys walking down the street in a suit in a nice neighbourhood, but he still gets stopped and searched because he's in that neighbourhood and he doesn't fit. So it's much more that side of things. It's that whether it's a conscious effort or if it's just a fear that drives the subconscious. The situations where if I walk on a train, there'll be, a woman will be standing there or someone will be standing there with their bag and they'll hold it that little bit closer to themselves, just, out of fear, or they'll cross the road when we're walking down the street, or if I walk into a nice shop, all of a sudden I'll have a shadow because the security guard will be following me around the shop and that sort of thing. So that happens all the time. So that's more what we face here. And then there's the institutional side of racism, where, so I was reading some articles today about it takes for young black graduates, it takes them 16, for every 16 applications they put in, it takes for them to get 1 reply, whereas opposed to white graduates with the same qualifications, 9 applications to get 1 reply. So that sort of thing, whether they're based on names or the appearance, because obviously a CV is, you don't see the person, but you can sometimes judge by a name. People judge it by names and stuff. I've been guilty of it as well. You get a CV and you go, oh, that they must be Indian or Chinese or whatever it is, Polish or whatever. But that shouldn't make any difference. You should be looking at the person, what they're capable of, and if they fit for your company. I've got a friend who's a lawyer, and he said for him to get to his position in his company, he's had to work twice as hard. And something we get told as, as kids, you're going to have to work twice as hard as anyone else to get to where you want to be, because we have to overcome those barriers. Like I say, and whether they're conscious barriers or just because, people feel more comfortable with their own around them, it's that sort of thing we've got to overcome. So having more people of colour in positions of power, in influential positions, will definitely help with that. But like I say, it's not as bad as the States, but then the institutional side of it is probably worse, because there's the history of colonialism in the UK, which, we're seeing everyone fight back against now with the dropping of the statues and the slave traders and that sort of thing. And so overcoming that side of it is going to be the biggest thing. And the only way we can do that is by talking and speaking up.
Now, how can we, as white people, how can we be more helping? Like, how can we be good allies to you?
The best thing and most important thing is to ask and talk. For too many years, things that we happen, like I said about, say, someone clutching their bag close or crossing the road, it was just something we would just let slide, just go, it's happened again, and not mention it. So we never talked about it. So from our side, we've got to talk more about situations and issues that have happened and positions we've been in, to make white people and other people understand those situations. And if you're not sure about it or you want to know about it, learn, look, read. There's so many good publications and articles and stories out there of the history of Black people in the UK, and what it's what the injustices people have faced in their lives. So looking at those and understanding those, and just learning is education is the key to it all. The more we know something, the less we fear it. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. There's some good programs on the BBC at the moment about race. So there's the Windrush, the program about the Windrush scandal that was on BBC the other night. I can't remember what it's called, but I can look it up for you guys.
On Google.
There's Black Being Black and British by David Oluluga. So that's a history of the Black people within Britain, and how the first Black person found in the UK was from AD 29 or something like that, and she was and she wasn't a slave or anything, because from genetic analysis she had good teeth, she was well nourished, and she was buried with care, so with her with things around her, so it wasn't a case of a mass grave or anything. So she was obviously fairly well off. But
that's interesting.
Looking at her genetics, she was from sub-Saharan Africa. So we've been in the UK for a long time. It's not a case of came over after the war to help build. We've been here for a long, long time. So understanding those things and understanding the people around you, and what like I said, we've got differences. There's cultural differences. Sometimes there's a language difference, for people from Africa and so on. But don't fear it. The more you know about it, the more you understand it, the less you're going to fear it. So that's the best way, I think, education and asking questions.
I was reading a book called Why I Don't Talk to White People About Race Anymore, or something like, there is a long name for it. And I think the whole message of the book is that actually white people cannot understand it just because they haven't lived through it. Like, I'm Russian, and I'm like, you don't have the same experience as me, and something has shaped me as a Russian, something has shaped you as half Indian and being Black in the UK. And so it's impossible to understand. And
you don't really understand it, but knowing the story, knowing where people come from, knowing what those differences are and why there's cultural differences, that's going to help. And then you're not necessarily be able to empathize because you've not been through the same things, but as long as you know the story, then there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's a good message.
The way I was thinking about this, I was chatting with someone at work about this the other day, it's kind of like, so when we were younger, especially as men, boys growing up, mental health, something, if you're in pain, you hold it down, you don't talk about it. It's a bit there was a stigma attached to it. But it took some people speaking out and talking about their mental health and how it's affecting them, but it's become so much more accepted to understand and talk about how you're feeling and be in touch with your feelings, say it's okay to not be okay. And that's taken a long time for that to happen, but it's came from people talking about it. We've got to do the same thing with race, talking about it, understanding it, until it comes to the point to say it's okay to be black, you know.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing with every kind of minorities. It's like women took lots of time. It took women lots of time to get the rights, and then it took lots of time for gays to get the rights, and I guess we are all on the way.
Indeed.
Yeah, so I guess I also want to ask you, you have probably answered this question, but anything specifically that you want us as white people to know about?
It's
Black.
learning, look, read, talk to your friends of color. It's about, like I say, understanding each other, understanding and talking to each other, and just being there, because it's the same thing with anyone. You just want someone there to be there for you, and they may not fully understand what you've gone through, but just being able to have that conversation, not being afraid to talk about it, not shying away from it, because it's that stiff upper lip British ethos that we have. We just hold it all in. Got to get past that. We've got to talk about things, and I think that's the best way to combat where we're at.
All right, well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Yeah, that was good, really good.
Thank you for talking with me.